The Earth is home to approximately 8.7 million different species of life forms. They are not only deeply interrelated, but also bring tremendous benefits to our daily lives. Ecosystems such as forests and wetlands help to purify water, regulate the climate, and mitigate natural disasters. Plants and microorganisms play a vital role in the production of food and medicine. Ecosystems and other blessings that nature provides to humans, known as ecosystem services, are indispensable for our survival. However, in the last half-century, biodiversity has been drastically lost. It's said that much of this is the result of climate change and the destruction of nature by human activities. How should we humans deal with these issues? An international prize is presented to individuals and organizations making significant contributions toward the solution of global environmental problems. The Blue Planet Prize was established by the Asahi Glass Foundation in 1992. Each year, 2 recipients are selected from a wide range of fields, including ecology, oceanography, physics, and economics, to be honored for their achievements. The 33rd annual award in 2024 was presented to a scientist and an organization who have made the world aware of the importance of ecosystems and biodiversity through the presentation of their research results. Professor Robert Costanza was the first to systematically estimate and show the world the value of ecosystem services.
The Blue Planet Prize will enable me to continue my work in collaboration with the many individuals, institutions, and groups around the world who all strive for a better, more fair, more prosperous, and sustainable future.
The other laureate is the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES, an international body that has served as a bridge between science and policy on biodiversity.
And so the 2024 Blue Planet Prize amplifies a fundamental truth. There cannot be any good life for humanity on this planet, nor really any sustainable solutions to climate change without the wise stewardship of all life on this planet.
We will review the careers and achievements of the prize laureates and look to the future of the global environment.
So there are many examples historically of civilizations that have collapsed because they have not taken their ecosystems and their natural capital sufficiently into account. So we don't want to go there, hopefully.
Robert Costanza was born in September 1950 in Donora, Pennsylvania, USA.
Well, Donora was a slightly infamous town. It was a steel mill town on the Monongahela River in a valley in the river.
The town had a serious problem with air pollution from its factories. Some residents developed respiratory problems and lost their lives.
And so I think all of those things were quite influential in how I thought about the world, that we definitely needed to address those pollution problems, the sort of negative side effects of all of this economic growth and activity that was providing, benefits and jobs and things like that. But how do we deal with the negative side effects, I think, was always a concern.
With his highly inquisitive mind, Professor Costanza engaged in various fields of study at university.
I was always interested in creating things and making things, and I think my first major in college was aerospace engineering.
At the time, humans were involved in an intense competition to land on the moon. As society rapidly developed, Professor Costanza further worked on cutting-edge research in fields such as architecture, environmental engineering, and economics. Then an encounter with a University of Florida professor served as a turning point. Professor Howard Odum, an authority on ecology, was renowned for popularizing the term ecosystem. Under the guidance of Professor Odum, Professor Costanza developed a devotion to ecosystem research.
And I think he and colleagues there and other PhD students I interacted with at Florida, I think we're all concerned about not just how the world works, but how to make the world better. So I thought that was very fortunate in my case and very influential on the way I ended up thinking about the world and how to solve these problems.
After earning his PhD from the University of Florida, Professor Costanza was engaged in research on the wetlands in Louisiana's coastal areas. In those days, the area was experiencing the loss of wetlands due to the development of oil and gas resources and other reasons. In the course of his research, Professor Costanza realized that there was no concrete indicator to properly assess the negative effects of wetland loss.
What are we losing when we lose these important wetlands? And so part of it, that's where I got started with trying to value ecosystems and the services they're providing.
What exactly are ecosystem services? Ecosystem services are classified into 4 categories. The first is provisioning services. These include foodstuffs such as meat, fish, and crops, water resources such as rivers and groundwater, and the blessings of forest resources such as timber. The second is regulating services. These are services provided by natural processes such as climate regulation, where plants absorb carbon dioxide to maintain appropriate temperatures, and pollination, where insects like bees pollinate plants. The third is cultural services. These involve the contentment we feel when we view a beautiful landscape, and the sense of well-being brought about by enjoying recreational activities in natural surroundings, or coming in close contact with nature and its creatures. And the fourth is supporting services. They provide the environment, including the air, oceans, and mountains, which forms the foundation for the survival of all life. Professor Costanza collected research results and papers on various genres of ecosystem services conducted around the world, and categorized them in detail. He estimated the value of each ecosystem service in each category.
So, for example, providing fresh water. Fresh water is provided by forests and upland areas and that filter the water coming through. If we didn't have those systems, we'd have to treat that water mechanically. We'd have to build water treatment plants, and so how much would that cost? And so that's the imputed value of that ecosystem for that one function.
Estimates also extended to cultural services.
So for things like recreation services, you might ask people, okay, if you didn't have, or if you had to pay for, the ability to go and have fun in this national forest, how much would you be willing to pay, even though it's free and you're not being charged? And so you can ask that question in various different ways and get a feel for, what that recreational service is worth to people.
In 1997, Professor Costanza organized the results of his survey and research into a paper which was published in an academic journal entitled The Value of the World's Ecosystem Services and Natural Capital. It revealed that the various benefits that humans receive from nature are worth $33 trillion per year, far above the total global GDP of $18 trillion at that time. The results of this study showed the world the importance of ecosystem services that had previously been underestimated.
And I think we all knew that ecosystems were important, the natural world was important, etc. But putting it in that kind of perspective, I think, got a lot of important attention, and kicked off a lot of additional research, which was one of our main intentions in doing the paper. So it encouraged a lot of additional research, and now there are over 6,000 research papers published every year on the topic of ecosystem services, and over 50,000 papers have been published, over the lifespan so far. So it's become a very important research area.
Professor Costanza contributed to the development of a new academic field called ecological economics, which integrates ecology and economics. Furthermore, he co-founded the International Society for Ecological Economics, or ISEE, as a forum for discussing it. Associate Professor Ida Kubiszewski, who has been working with Professor Costanza, believes that ecological economics is the key to changing the world's future for the better.
Well, and I think a lot of the things we work on are very solutions-based, and so we don't do research just for the purpose of doing research. We try to apply that research of how to make the world better. What's the solution that we're proposing? How do we get it implemented? How do we fix some of the global problems that are out there?
Today, Professor Costanza has doubts about GDP as an economic growth indicator. GDP does not include activities such as housework or volunteer labor, nor does it reflect the value of ecosystem services.
GDP only counts marketed goods and services. And many of the things that it counts, are not things that we want more of. So there's more crime, there's more, security devices, there's more police. That adds to GDP. I think that's what needs to change in this sort of whole economic paradigm, to recognize that the economy can't just operate, by itself as an independent thing. We have to recognize that it's embedded in society, embedded in the rest of nature, the rest of the planet. And unless you recognize that interdependence, we're going to be headed for disaster.
In 2022, he published a book titled Addicted to Growth: Societal Therapy for a Sustainable Well-Being Future. In the book, he discusses the dangers of GDP as an economic indicator and calls for the need of a new indicator of well-being for humans.
In the end, if we continue to degrade all of these ecosystems, I think the economy itself would collapse. And I think we would, our civilization would collapse. And this has happened before, The ancient Maya, for example, I think are one example where they overexploited their natural capital resources and led to the collapse of the civilization.
Professor Costanza is convinced that the mistakes in the past will not be repeated if modern wisdom can be directed in the right direction.
We will definitely find our way through, but I think we certainly can, and I'm still hopeful that that's a possibility, because I know that the majority of people around the world would like to see the kind of world that we're talking about.
IPBES has as a mission to strengthen the science policy interface. That's what we say for the conservation, the sustainable use of biodiversity, and for human well-being.
In the 1990s, as concern grew worldwide about environmental changes, global warming began to be discussed as a common issue. On the other hand, not many people were aware of the impact of biodiversity loss on their lives.
When we talked about biodiversity, it was seen mostly through the lens of conservation, and conservation in areas which were, for many people, far away from them, and therefore they did not realize that biodiversity is everything around them and how they connect to that.
It was an initiative coordinated by the United Nations from 2001 to 2005, titled the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, that changed this situation significantly. The report, produced based on research and analysis on biodiversity around the world, made many people aware of its importance. Against that background, there was a need for an organization that could continue to provide useful knowledge and scientific insights for policymaking on biodiversity. Just as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, does. That's why IPBES was established in 2012. The main mission of IPBES is to produce and publish reports on the state of knowledge and science on biodiversity. Every year, once a research topic has been chosen at the General Assembly, experts are recruited from governments, universities, and other institutions.
We have scientists from all regions of the world, that we have experts with very different backgrounds.
In selecting members, emphasis is placed on maintaining a gender and regional balance, as well as the participation of scientists of different knowledge systems. Professor Hashimoto Shizuka from the University of Tokyo is one of the members who joined the program in 2019. A researcher on land use issues, he compiled a report as a leader in the Asia-Oceania region.
例えば里地里山の利用がされなくなってきた。例えば森林が放棄される、農地が放棄される、こういった問題自体が従来人が管理することで、育まれてきたその地域の生物多様性の低下につながっているって言われている。他方で日本はたくさんの木材、食料を海外から輸入して、で他の国に生物多様性の影響を起こしている。
In preparing the report, Professor Hashimoto invited indigenous and local people to participate. Incorporating the knowledge and opinions of those living in the area is a policy highly valued by IPBES.
and it also wants to have people from different knowledge systems. Scientists, of course, they are the majority, but we also have indigenous and local knowledge holders, because IPBES also believes that it's a multitude of systems which provide more richness and more diversity and more information for policymakers.
Each report is completed when signed by all member governments, following 3 years of discussion by nearly 500 experts. IPBES is responsible for publishing reports and providing updates and options.
We do not provide prescriptive policies, so we don't tell governments what they must do, because it's not our place to do that. It's going to be able to provide the basis for governments to then work on their own policy and hopefully use those reports, those policy reports.
Up to 2024, IPBES has prepared and published more than 10 reports. One of the most successful reports it has worked on was the Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, released in 2019.
The fact that it literally was on the front page of every major news outlet globally.
What has had a strong impact on society is the fact that as many as 1 million of the Earth's 8 million species of plants and animals could become extinct within a few decades.
That is 10 to 100 times faster than the normal background rate of species replacement in nature.
For the first time, the report clearly outlined the human actions responsible for the loss of biodiversity. There are 5. Land use change, including deforestation. Over-exploitation of land and marine resources. Climate change due to human activities. Pollution in all its forms. And the spread of invasive alien species. The goal set by the 15th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2022 included taking urgent action to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. Specific numerical targets were also set for those 5 actions.
There are targets for all of those. Some of them even have a number, so it's very important, such as reducing by half the amount of pesticides. That's the target on pollution. And it includes that. For example, there is a target on invasive species, but there is also a target on the other aspects.
In the midst of these trends, each country was accelerating its measures.
You know, we've had impact at all kinds of levels. So IPBES's work was taken up by the G20 and by the G7. It's been taken up at national level by parliaments and by legislatures declaring national biodiversity emergencies or allocating significantly greater funding to extinction and biodiversity concerns.
For many institutions and organizations, the reports and materials provided by IPBES are now essential to the discussion of biodiversity.
I think in terms of impact for us, I will say that when we were starting, nobody knew who we were. But that has changed over time, so people already know who we are even. And for me, the fact that biodiversity is now becoming mainstream.
Among those that have come to rely on IPBES reports in recent years are many companies and other profit-oriented organizations. For companies, biodiversity conservation has become an issue to be addressed in parallel with the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions. proactively addressing these issues enhances the social value of the company.
ある企業の経営が自然資本にどの程度依存しているのか、あるいは自然資本に対してどういう影響を与えているのか、こういった情報をですね、整理して情報開示していくと。そうすることで企業が生物多様性あるいは自然資本の持続的な利用に配慮したような経営をしているということをアピールできると。例えば投資家からの投資を引きつけることができる、こういった国際的な枠組みができています。
IPBES is currently working on a new report.
Of course, IPBES has a very full program up to 2030 with many major assessments scheduled.
The current themes are climate change and biodiversity and business and biodiversity. There's an emphasis on surveys and research to balance climate change countermeasures and biodiversity conservation. For example, growing crops for biofuels to replace fossil fuels is one countermeasure to improve climate change. But excessive amounts of crop cultivation can have harmful effects on ecosystems. Both climate change and biodiversity loss are serious environmental issues, and the aim is to provide concrete solutions that benefit both. IPBES brings together the world's wisdom and insight from all perspectives to protect biodiversity. It will continue to work for the conservation and utilization of biodiversity as well as for the well-being of humans.
People can act in many ways for biodiversity through the choices they make on a daily basis. They can act as consumer by choosing perhaps to consume less. They can act through the education they provide to their children with more connection to nature. They basically should see everything they do through the lens of their connection with nature.
Living in harmony with many forms of life, we humans are part of the global ecosystem. It is the responsibility and mission of each and every one of us to ensure that our blue planet is passed on to the next generation.
What people need to realize is that there is a better world that's possible. We're not stuck in the current system. We're not stuck with the only alternative being business as usual and going forward with the typical system.
People have a choice in their hands, and they have most of the people around the world have all of the information they need in order to act. I believe that there is a bright future for all of the species on Earth with whom we share the planet.
This program was made possible by the Asahi Glass Foundation.